Hi everybody, it's Pippin, and I'm here to talk to you about random numbers. Random numbers. As per usual, hi, it's me, random numbers. I guess I should say that random numbers are probably my favorite thing in programming. So this is a really nice, very simple piece of programming for us to learn about. I think it's very fun. Back to the screen. Okay, so I'm going to go over to Atom, which is here. You can see probably that I've got the JavaScript object version of my moving circle back in place here. If you want that, you can grab it from the lecture notes for this video, which are available. So that just means that I've got my circle is a single variable with properties describing its x, y, size, and speed, and that I'm using them with the dot notation that we've talked about in the past, circle.x, to get its x position, etc. And we know what that looks like. I've got it running here. If I reload the page, my circle moves from left to right, 1 pixel per frame. Okay? Now, that's a good program. It does this nice specific thing. It moves a circle. But one thing about this program is that it will always be the same every time I run it. Every time I reload, the circle always starts on the left, always moves to the right, always at the same speed. None of that stuff is being varied. And we probably have intuitions about how we could vary it if we did things like, for instance, use mouse X and mouse Y instead of some of our other variables. But one really easy and interesting way to vary things in a program is with random numbers. Computers, simply put, can generate random numbers and give them to us to do what we will with them. So jumping back over here, just for the moment, in my draw loop, just here at the very bottom of my draw, I'm just going to throw in something that will give me a random number. So the thing that gives you a random number is this little function called random. It just looks like that, just the word random and parentheses. And this is one of those functions that returns something, okay? So when we use this function, it's going to give us something back. And because it's going to give us something back, we want to use that something somewhere. And one way that we can do that is that we can store it inside a variable. Just in this way that we've been declaring variables and assigning things to them in the past. So inside my draw loop, I'm saying let random number. So I'm making a variable called random number. And yes, I am doing this inside my draw loop. That's a special kind of thing. You probably won't be doing this all that often, but just for now, just know that you're allowed to make variables inside functions and in other places. So I'm making a variable called random number. I'm using the equal sign, the assignment operator, to put something inside it. And what I'm going to put inside it is what this random function is going to give me back when I call it. And what the random function gives me back is numbers between 0 and 1. Okay? And to be able to see that, we know that if we want to see what's inside a variable, we need to print it out. So I'm going to say console.log random number, like that. And that will enable me to see every time through the draw loop. So 60 times per second, it's doing all of this stuff. So 60 times per second, it gets a random number from this random function. It gets put into my random number variable, and I print it out. So let's go back across to Google Chrome. Let's open up the JavaScript console, like we should always do. There it is. And I'll make this a little bit bigger so we can see it. So again, a little bit like the matrix, you can see that 60 times per second, or thereabouts, random numbers are being printed out. And that's what's being put inside my random number variable. And if you look at it, you can see that it is numbers, roughly speaking, between 0 and 1. Now, one important thing to know is you'll never actually get 1, the number 1, from the random function. It goes all the way up to just almost 1, 0.99999, etc. And you can see that these numbers are changing every single time. There's no pattern here or way of knowing which number is going to come next because they're random, right? And that's literally what this idea of random numbers is. At a very, very base level with computers, getting a random number is about getting a number between 0 and 1 that you can't predict. And that can obviously lead to unpredictable behavior in your program, which is the kind of thing that we enjoy. Okay, now, just getting numbers between 0 and 1, which is what random does when we call it this way, is good, but it's often the case, as we've talked about, with things with numbers that need to be in specific ranges, like colors needing to be between 0 and 255, that we would like to get random numbers within a specific range, and we can, in fact, do that. So let's go back, get rid of that code, and let's say that our circle, so I'm back up here in my circle variable at the top here, I'm going to add one more property, which is its fill, the fill color that I'll use when I draw it. It's going to be a shade again, and I'm going to start it off as 0, which is black, right? So before I draw my circle, in that case, down here, I want to set the fill to be circle.fill. And that will set the fill to whatever is inside the circle's fill property. So by default, that is 0, right? This means actually that if I go and look at the program now, I don't see anything because the circle is black and it's on a black background. So we've got the mysterious kind of, is the circle there or is it not there feeling? It's there, but it's being drawn in black on black, which means that we can't see it. So, that being the case, if I wanted to set the circle's fill to a random number, I could do circle.fill equals random, but that's not really going to work out very well because that will set the circle's fill to a random number between 0 and 1. That's pretty much going to be just like black, right? 0 is black and 1 is very, 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 very close to being black as well. Fortunately, we can also use random in a different way. That is, we can call this function with different arguments and it will behave in different ways. And in particular, if I give it a range of numbers, so from 0 in this case to 255, separated by a comma because they're two different arguments, then it will give me a random number between those two numbers. So a random number between 0 and 255, and it will put that random number into circle.fill, and then circle.fill will be used to color in my circle. So this means that every frame, every time through draw, 60 times per second, circle.fill is being set to a random number between 0 and 255. So the result of that is a flickering circle. Kind of eerie. It could be the start of a horror movie or something along those lines. The circle certainly seems to have a bit more personality now, for better or worse. And that is the secret of random numbers, right? What we really want is random numbers a lot of the time in specific ranges that are meaningful to us. So a random number between 0 and 255 is meaningful because it specifies a color. But we can use randomness, again, just like we can use variables to mess around with any number in our program. We can use randomness to mess around with any number in our program as well. For instance, if we wanted to, we could apply a random number to our circle's speed too. So we could say circle.speed is equal to, and then we want to use random again, so we type in the name of the random function, and we could specify another range of numbers that we want our random number to be between. So for instance, if I wanted my circle to kind of jitter around, I could say a random number between -5 and +5. So that's also important to see that we can specify ranges that start in the negative and go up to the positive, right? They don't have to be numbers at 0 or above. So by doing this, every time we go through the draw loop, the circle's speed is going to be randomly between -5 and +5, and then that number is going to be added to the circle's position. So it's going to move around to the left and to the right because we've got these negative numbers sometimes and we've got positive numbers sometimes. So if we go look at that circle, I'll reload so it's in this. So it's over there on the left. You can see it's jittering around. Actually, maybe it would be a good idea for me to move it to the center. I'll do that quickly. So I'm going to move its X to 250 as well, just so that it's in the middle of the screen to start with. So there we go. So every frame, 60 times per second, we're getting a random number between -5 and +5, and we're adding that to the circle's X position, and that's causing it to kind of shiver around a little bit. And it kind of makes it look like it's alive a lot more, right? Because it's unpredictable, and that's such a quality of things that we associate with being organic, living things, rather than the kind of really standard computery thing of being totally linear, totally predictable. Now, because we don't know what the circle is going to do, it kind of feels a little bit more like it might have preferences, like it seems like it prefers to move to the left a little bit, even though that's not really possible. The random numbers are completely random, so it's not trying to do anything. But appearances are so important in programming. It's one of the exciting things about programming is kind of fooling people into, or allowing people to believe that something is kind of living and intentional inside the computer system. So that's pretty fun. And we can do this random number thing with everything. There's no number that we cannot randomify. By way of example, we could set the y of the circle directly to a random number. So rather than applying some kind of extra thing like a speed and changing the speed, we could set the y to a random number between 0, which is the top of the screen, and height, which is the bottom of the screen. And then it's going to kind of jump around at any point on the vertical, right? So every time through draw, the circle's y position is going to be a random position between 0, the top, and height, the bottom. So it could end up anywhere every frame, and that ends up looking like this, right? It's jumping up and down, flickering around on the vertical while still wiggling around on the horizontal. So that's starting to look kind of nice. We may as well go one step further and also set its size to something random. So let's say circle.size, and what shall we do? Let's just set it to another random number in a range. Let's set it to be between 10 and 100. So this will now cause it to have that same kind of behavior, right, of randomness, of sort of flickering between different values, these values between 10 and 100. So we go look at that. And now you can see it's also changing size. It's getting a little bit confusing, but you know, there's something there. If you had a bunch of those circles, it could start looking kind of interesting, potentially. If we were to remove this line that changes the y, that's quite a nice effect as well, right? So now it's not moving up and down on the y, but it's changing size all the time. You get this kind of raindrop kind of effect, which is kind of satisfying. But that's it, right? Basically, the point here is random is great, and the key thing to know is that if you want a random number, you can say random and then give it the range of numbers you want that random number to be selected from, and then you can use that as a value in your program. Most obviously by putting it into your variables or the properties of your objects, and then using those things to draw and to make things move and so on. So randomness is absolutely your friend. You should make heavy use of it because it's just super fun. It's always worth trying to insert a bit of randomness into your code. Okay, see you later. See you next video.